Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. I'm State Representative Ken Gordon, and today I'm looking forward to a really interesting show. A little later on in our program, we're going to be joined by Tom Conroy, who's the chairman of the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. He's the House chairman, and we are going to be talking about the issue of minimum wage in Massachusetts. Tom Conroy is also running for state treasurer, and later on in our show we'll talk to him a little bit about how it's going on the campaign trail for him. But for now, let's talk about minimum wage and the efforts of the various entities involved in raising the minimum wage. It's really a moving target, and there's a lot of discussion about that, so I'd like to explain to you before we go on the parties involved and the plans involved. Currently there are three parties involved in the efforts to raise the minimum wage. There's a ballot question that is likely to appear on the November ballot. A group in Massachusetts called Raise Up Massachusetts, which is actually an assembly of various groups, has gotten together enough signatures to put a question on the November ballot that will ask residents whether we are interested in raising the minimum wage. Polls have shown a lot of support for that ballot question. That ballot question provides that the minimum wage in Massachusetts, if it wins at the ballot, will increase the minimum wage from its current $8 an hour to $10.50, and it will be indexed to inflation. What that means is that each year the government will determine an inflationary index or a rate of index, and the minimum wage will go up as a proportion of inflation. The ballot question also raises the tip minimum wage. Now, many people in Massachusetts believe that our wait staff, waiters and waitresses, and other tipped employees are paid at least the minimum wage, and then tips are added on top of that. But actually in Massachusetts, tipped employees receive a different minimum. Their minimum is currently $2.63. Their minimum has not increased since the 1990s. The question on the ballot would increase the tipped minimum to 60% of the general minimum, which the math shows would be about $6.30 if the general minimum wage is raised to $10.50. That's the ballot question, and that will be on the ballot on July 1 unless the promoters of the ballot decide to do something else with it. With that as a backdrop, the Senate has passed a bill in the end of 2013. Their bill on minimum wage calls for the increase in the minimum wage to $11 an hour, that's 50 cents more than the ballot question, over 3 years. The Senate bill would go into effect July 1 of 2014, which is 6 months sooner than the ballot question, and it would take 3 years to get up to the $11. It would be phased in over 3 years. The Senate bill is also tied or indexed to inflation, meaning it will go up each year as a component of inflation. The Senate bill would increase the minimum wage on tipped employees to 50% of general minimum wage, meaning that it would go up to $5.50 an hour when the $11 goes into play in 3 years. Now, the House of Representatives, where I serve, has a third plan that it's introduced. That plan would increase the minimum wage to $10.50 over 3 years. Again, it would start to come into play on July 1, 2014, 6 months sooner than the ballot question would. It would take 3 years from that point to be fully implemented, and it would raise the tipped minimum to a lesser extent than the Senate or the ballot question. The House has also included a number of other provisions with the minimum wage. One of them is that it deals with unemployment insurance. Together with the minimum wage bill, the House is restructuring unemployment insurance and the way that we charge premiums for unemployment insurance so that the fund has enough money to pay claims going forward and to meet federal standards. We could probably spend a whole other show on issues such as that, but just for this program, suffice it to say that unemployment insurance will be reformed by the House bill and also by a companion Senate bill in a way that will not affect anyone's benefits or eligibility. They'll continue as they have been. On the House side, there's a third bill that's also included within the minimum wage proposal, and that's called the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. What that will do is set up a structure, a statutory structure, that will establish the relationship between an employer and an employee where the employee works in the home of the employer. This typically occurs in the case of a live-in nanny that's caring for children, or a provider who moves into the home of a senior or a disabled person, in which the person is not only employed by the person with whom they live, but that person also becomes the landlord, and the worker is on the job site essentially 24/7 because they live there. So what this would provide is some statutory structure to determine what are the hours that this worker is expected to work, how much time do they have for rest, what access do they have to leave the work site, the home, to do personal matters, personal things. So this is all in play. These are the three levels of analysis that we're talking about when we talk about raising the wage. With that, we're going to turn to a discussion of the implications and what we think is likely to happen going forward with respect to the minimum wage with House Chairman Tom Conroy. So with that as a backdrop, we welcome Chairman Tom Conroy from the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. And where do you think this is headed, the minimum wage in Massachusetts?
Well, we're going to be debating this on the floor tomorrow, today, and so it's a really exciting time. I think we are going to have, I hope, the highest minimum wage in the country by the end of this legislative process, and hopefully a bill in the governor's hands by July 1st of this year that gives working families, particularly those at the lower wage scale, a big boost in their income with a dollar increase in their hourly wages.
It's interesting because I know how hard you've been working in the past months. Actually, we've both been working hard
Exactly.
on this bill.
You've been a great partner in that regard, Ken. It's been great working with you on the committee.
And what are some of the highlights that you want to talk to the viewers about that they can expect to see as these negotiations proceed through the House and the Senate?
Well, we're trying to increase the minimum wage from where it is right now, $8, up to at least $10.50 an hour. That's a 31+% increase in the minimum wage for folks at that lower end of the wage scale. So very proud about that. And the fundamental, I guess, tenet here, Ken, is that if we put more money into the hands of working families who don't really have disposable income right now, they're going to spend it because they need to spend it. They need to spend it on food, on housing, on clothing. And if they do spend it, as we expect, that's going to lead to higher consumer demand, more economic growth, and most important, more job growth. So that's something I'm really excited about. That's one of the key tenets of the bill. There's a couple other pieces here that are quite important too. There's a tipped minimum wage increase for the first time in 15 years. If you've got waiters and waitresses out there that are listening, they will be able to get a raise as well in this to the tune of at least 30% and hopefully higher. One of the things that we're going to be talking about on the floor tomorrow is whether or not we can see that tip minimum wage edge up a little bit more towards 50% of what the minimum wage is.
Yeah, I know that tip workers, they're entitled to get the general minimum wage if their tips don't add up to as much as the general minimum wage.
That's correct.
But in some of our communities, especially some of the gateway communities and some of the restaurants elsewhere where cash is more the form of payment than
Right.
credit cards, I think it would be difficult sometimes to account for all of this and to enforce those workers' rights. So this would give them a better opportunity to see more of that money come to them.
Exactly right. It's sort of a more secure guarantee of at least some decent wages. And quite frankly, it's something that other states look at and say, well, why not just make that tip minimum wage as high as the minimum wage itself? And in fact, 7 states do that. And it's something that hasn't really hurt the restaurant industry.
No.
So there's other models out there that are pushing us and pushing me and I think you and others to advocate for an even higher tip minimum wage than what we may end up getting through this process.
Yeah, as you say, California is one state that has none at all.
Exactly
and we
right.
know that Napa Valley does quite well.
Quite well,
Great,
yes.
Great
yeah.
restaurants there.
The restaurant industry in California is booming.
Yeah. One of the things I'm proud of is that we had heard earlier that there was some pressure on House leadership to tie the increase in the minimum wage to unemployment insurance reform that might affect benefits or eligibility.
That's right.
But now what we see is that there will be reform because we've got to have enough money to meet the federal standard, but that reform won't affect anyone's benefits or eligibility going forward.
That's exactly right, Ken, and I think we should all be proud of the fact that we're not going to be taking away benefits from folks who are already disadvantaged. They've lost their job, they're struggling to find that next job, and we don't want to be taking away benefits or making it more difficult to actually qualify. We had an opportunity here after the Speaker of the House gave me a mandate as the chair of the committee to say, look, I want to package this minimum wage bill and the unemployment insurance reform bill together, and I want them to be addressed simultaneously. And I made the appeal back to him, well, that's fine, Mr. Speaker, as long as we can define exactly what the parameters of that unemployment insurance reform are. And I'm proud to say that we did achieve what the Speaker wanted in terms of packaging the bills together and offering some benefits, I shouldn't say benefits, basically a tax cut to the business community. Hopefully that will stimulate some job growth too. But we protected those benefits and that eligibility criteria for those who are already unemployed. And I thought that was a great way to address the issue and reform in a way that made sense for our working families as well as for the business community.
We should talk about that for a minute because, as you say, reform of the unemployment insurance program was necessary. We have to make sure that we're meeting those standards so that we have enough in the reserve fund
That's right.
to handle our needs.
Right.
We've done that, though, in a way that will lower the premiums for most businesses here in Burlington and Bedford in this district.
That's right.
And for many businesses across the Commonwealth.
That's right.
Can you talk about that? That's important because as businesses are looking forward to seeing how they're going to be reacting to the new legislation before them, they shouldn't overlook the benefits that will come their way as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the way we reformed the unemployment insurance structure and system was, in essence, to give virtually every single company in Massachusetts a tax cut over the course of the next 4 years. And it is a 4-year plan. So this is something that we hope can lead to perhaps more job growth, more investment in people, working people right here in Massachusetts by businesses. And it's what the business community wanted and asked for. They wanted a tax cut. They point out that the Massachusetts unemployment insurance system is a relatively high tax compared to other states, which is true, and so we did make that cut. I would also just let your viewers know that one of the reasons, or the key reason, why we have an unemployment system that does have a high tax is we're one of the highest wage states in the country and one of the highest cost states in the country. So it makes sense that those taxes are relatively high compared to other states. We don't always want to compare ourselves to states that are, have higher unemployment rates, not as much high education, not as many great middle-class jobs out there as Massachusetts, and so I think we need to keep that in mind as we think about the right way to reform our systems.
You're right about that. We often hear about where we fall among the 50 states,
Right.
but really we're competing with a handful of those that have a similar type of economy that we have.
Exactly right, Ken. So we've got high-tech jobs. We are the life sciences capital of the country. We've got financial services here. We've got a healthcare system that is finest in the nation. So a lot of those industries have jobs that are very well-paying. And if you get laid off from a well-paying job, you should get a decent and sizable unemployment insurance benefit. That's the fundamental way the system works, is that your benefit is about 50% of what your wage was.
Right.
So if you have high wages, 50% of that's going to be higher than perhaps a typical job in a place like Alabama or Arkansas.
Right. Now you've got a unique perspective because you're also running for state treasurer.
Yes.
And so you're speaking to a lot of folks all across this state. They must talk to you about this topic and others. What has been your experience in talking to people about this topic first, and then we'll talk
Well,
about some
people are
others.
really excited about a minimum wage increase. They see it as long overdue. We haven't had a raise since 2008. And if you look at the fact that our minimum wage has not kept pace with either inflation or purchasing power, literally over the course of the past 45 years, people are really hungry for this kind of lift in their opportunities to make a better wage and move up and move ahead in life. we really have a lot of folks out there who are struggling on the margins. And I have been traveling all around the state, Ken, as you mentioned. And if you get outside of 495, there's really a different economy out there. We have, for example, unemployment rates in some of our gateway cities like New Bedford and Holyoke and Lawrence and Pittsfield and other places that are clearly in the double digits and approaching 20%, which is really kind of frightening. Those are almost Depression-era type unemployment rates. So we need to do more to give more opportunity to folks and grow the economy in those places. The other thing that's really sort of frightening when you think about it is that there's 500,000 people who are working in Massachusetts right now, Ken, who are making less than $11 an hour.
Right.
500,000 people. That's about 17% of our workforce.
That's right.
That's a lot of folks, and they need a better chance, as I said, to pay the bills, move up, move ahead. Very difficult to raise a family making less than $22,000 a year, given the high cost of Massachusetts. So these are some of what I've heard. These are some of the issues that I feel passionate about, and I want to continue to address these issues of economic justice and income inequality as the next treasurer of Massachusetts.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because it's a fundamental issue here in Massachusetts, because we talk about homelessness, which we
Yes.
have a terrible problem with. But in raising the minimum wage, we can address some of that. 29% of the people living in homeless shelters like the motel in Bedford,
Right.
they're employed, and they're
Right.
employed at minimum wage jobs, but
Right.
that doesn't help them to earn enough money
Money.
so that they're free of public support.
We're trying to get more people into a situation of self-sufficiency. We've got a $16 billion social safety net here in our budget in Massachusetts, and we're going to be debating the budget, as you know, Ken, this month. The best way to manage our finances, and again, this is my approach as hopefully the next state treasurer, the best way to manage our finances, manage our budget, is by shrinking the need for that social safety net, by helping more people get into good paying jobs with decent wages, decent benefits, some stability, a career path ahead that gives them the kind of self-sufficiency that prevents them from even needing to have their health insurance paid for,
Right.
to have a subsidy for their housing, to have be on Title I and have school lunch programs because you can't afford to even provide a lunch for your child, subsidized child care, right? Well, there's all these different subsidies that we offer to help people make very basic needs. And if we can reduce the need for that and reduce that $16 billion in a good way by lifting people up, that's going to make us financially and economically stronger as a Commonwealth far into the future, Ken.
Right, right. We get people paying taxes that way.
That's right.
And at the same time, their need for assistance, for public assistance, is less. So as a Commonwealth, it's a win-win situation.
It's a win-win,
and
Ken, and
certainly
I'm all
win-win
about
for them.
win-wins, exactly. And I think that's what this minimum wage bill is all about.
And one of the things that I've enjoyed about working with you've got the education and background in working not only in business, but in running economies. And working with the Commonwealth as treasurer, you'll be running an economy, which is complex. And can you talk about what you expect, what some of your plans, if you have the support and you become our next treasurer?
Well, great. Thank you for the opportunity, Ken. So, there's a lot of people, as we just discussed, struggling on the margins. And the economy's fundamentally changed. Those job opportunities aren't out there like they used to be. Education is a lot more expensive to attain and pay for higher education, particularly whether it's community college or UMass or whatever. And so I want to use the tools and the authority of the Treasurer's Office to open up those educational opportunities and job opportunities for folks. I want to, for example, invest more of our short-term cash that the Treasurer has authority over in our local banks. And if those local banks have that money and a stronger balance sheet, they'll be able to lend more to our local businesses. Businesses right here in Burlington and Bedford and in Wayland, where I'm from, the whole metro region, throughout the state. And particularly minority and women-owned businesses throughout the state that aren't getting access to the kind of capital that they need to start up a new business or expand a small business or a Main Street business. And so if we can increase that capital for those businesses, they can grow and hire more people, more Main Street middle class jobs. So that's a great job opportunity creator that I want to put forward as the next treasurer, and continue something actually that Steve Grossman, our current treasurer, is doing. Educational opportunities. Few people really know that the treasurer actually has authority over a student loan fund. So if you're a UMass grad and you major in science, technology, engineering, or math, you can get access to a low-cost loan or a grant from the treasurer's office. I think we need to greatly expand that authority, recapitalize that fund, offer more low-cost financing and grants to make college and higher education more affordable for all those people who want to become self-sufficient, want to improve themselves, know the value of a higher education so that they can get those good middle-class jobs. So those are two big initiatives that I really feel passionately about, and I want to implement as the next state treasurer can.
What I've liked about what Treasurer Grossman has done is he's opened the checkbook so that we could look online.
Transparency,
and
exactly
transparency.
Right, yes.
And I know that you'll continue in doing that.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in transparency. I ran for public office 8 years ago, Ken, in part to enhance the public's trust in government. I wanted to use my private sector background in financial management and operational efficiency and effectiveness. I wanted to use my progressive values and principles to make sure that we were focusing on the right priorities, making the right choices, and helping people move up and move ahead in life so that they can have a successful future for themselves and their families. And it's that combination of those progressive values and goals and the financial management skills that I think make me uniquely qualified to be the next treasurer and really help this economy grow and help more people and enhance the public's trust in government. So that's, I think, what it's all about.
You know, what I find interesting is, along with the values that you're talking about, your experience includes your years of working with risk analysis.
Yes.
Companies like Marsh Inc.
Marsh Inc. and Marsh McLennan Companies, exactly.
Right.
So, to every side of a good investment, there's a risk associated with that. And that risk and return on investment versus the risk, is something that I've been schooled in with my education. I've got graduate degrees in economics, and I've got an MBA in finance. I also, as you mentioned,
from some pretty good schools too.
Well, you're kind to say
Yale
that, but also, when I worked in the private sector, in the financial services industry, in risk management, you really understand that interplay between risk and return. And that, of course, if you're managing, for example, as the treasurer does, a $58 billion pension fund, it's all about risk and return. If you're managing the lottery, a $5 billion business, a lot of that's about risk and return too. And I've got a bunch of project management experience, which is very related to what the school building authority, which is another responsibility of the treasurer's office, is all about. Managing the operations around and the project design and build and financing around rebuilding perhaps school buildings right here in Burlington or Bedford. Certainly I had a very intimate experience in Wayland with the rebuilding of the high school just in the past couple of years with the school building authority under the auspices of the treasurer's office. So I've got a lot of experience. It's very relevant to this office, and I hope to put it to good use.
Yeah, here in Burlington, we've had a couple of schools that have just been built. In Wilmington, they're building the high school now.
That's great.
Some of these are going on now, and it'll be great to continue to be involved in these experiences. Talk about what else, since you've been in the state legislature, what are some of the experiences that you'll bring in to serve as state treasurer?
Well, and I've been involved in some of the reform efforts on the pension so that people can feel secure, state employees, municipal employees in particular, about having a pension when they retire, so that they can retire with a sense of dignity. I think that's really important. But we have some challenges here with some unfunded liabilities and some needs for more money. And I've actually authored a couple of what I call sort of smart financial management pieces of legislation that have become law that have reduced those liabilities and helped make those pension funds more solvent so that people can be secure in retirement. Those bills are actually something that have bumped up our credit rating as a Commonwealth. It's now the highest it's ever been. It's AA+. And the credit rating agencies point to these two laws that I initiated as reasons why we are now borrowing at lower cost and saving taxpayers millions of dollars every year. And we can, of course, use those savings and apply it towards better education, more municipal aid from the state to cities and towns, better public health, better public transportation, et cetera. So again, another situation, Ken, smart investment management and win-win situations that we've put in place to help everybody.
Just like with the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, I know you've been dealing with issues like mandates dealing with retirement benefits and
Yes.
healthcare benefits
Right.
that have been hanging over our heads.
That's right.
Because in a poor economy, we haven't been making some of the deposits that we otherwise would
That's
have.
exactly right.
But Massachusetts is no different than any other state. because
Some
most
states are a lot worse, exactly.
much worse.
Yes,
and
much
hardly
worse.
any state has
Right.
kept up.
Right, that's
So
exactly
with
right.
an eye toward managing that risk and managing those liabilities, I look forward to seeing some of the solutions that you work toward.
Absolutely, and I became a student of these issues as soon as I walked into the legislature 8 years ago. I got recognized by the chairman of the committee at that time and the governor's office as a guy with the expertise to help solve some of these vexing problems with an eye towards using best practices in financial management to address our challenges and come up with appropriate solutions. And I've been able to do that. I want to do that as the next treasurer in a whole bunch of different areas.
I remember going to one meeting where the topic was water resources.
Yes.
And that's another area that you've been involved with.
Yes.
They're sort of all over the particular issues that affect our towns and cities.
And some of these, Ken, you're great to point that out. The treasurer has authority over a financing mechanism to help municipalities, cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth, renovate, restore, rebuild our water infrastructure. And we take it a lot for granted, as I think you know. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. A lot of these water systems are buried underground. But some of them, Ken, are 80, 100 years old. And we've had water main breaks all over Massachusetts over the course of the past decade. And we need to repair more. And these are the kind of long-term, smart financing, fix our infrastructure projects that I care deeply about. I want to enhance the funding that we allocate towards those low-cost loans for municipalities. We've got to fix our water infrastructure. It's good for business, it's good for our health, obviously, and it's good for our communities. And again, a win-win-win if we can do this right and do it with lower borrowing costs, as I've been able to help achieve through some of the other stuff we just talked about.
Interesting issues.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you for coming on to Rapping with the Rep. Thank you for our discussions. Thank you for being with us. Now, this will be a little interesting because what we're going to do is a little different. In a few weeks, on the 24th of April, we're going to convene with a group from Bedford, from Burlington, and the Chambers of Commerce from the various areas. When, at that point, you've heard Tom mention that in the next few days we'll be meeting in hearing, debate, and voting on the House version of the minimum wage and unemployment insurance reform. We'll know a little bit more. We'll be there to take I'll be there to take your questions at that point, and anyone is welcome to attend. So until then, this is Ken Gordon. Thank you for watching Rapping with the Rep. Welcome back, folks. So 3 weeks has gone by since our interview with Chairman Conroy. We were able to assemble a group of folks from Burlington, from Bedford, and from the Chambers of Commerce. I was able to get a haircut. And we're now going to show you the question and answer session that followed the presentation that occurred here in Burlington in late April. That's where we are. There is a proposal that's been passed by the House. I voted for it. I worked on it, and I contributed to it. There's been a proposal that's passed the Senate in November, and their unemployment bill has passed in, I think, February. It's being conferred together, and the ballot question will likely be there in November, and now we've seen what they are. I'll take questions. Let's say it's 20 after 8. I'd like to, we'll see where it goes, but we'll get out of here by 9 anyway. Yes, Chris, I'm back. The governor has said that he's considering the options between the House and the Senate version. I don't think that he really wants to come out and take sides while it's in conference, but he's in favor of the increase in the minimum wage. He's in favor of the reforms to unemployment as long as they don't affect eligibility and benefits, which neither does. I'm going to leave this slide up because that's sort of where the rubber meets the road as far as this discussion goes. Yes, Sally.
That's a great slide. Why what went into the discussion that led to the difference here?
We took different paths to get to the same place. We didn't work together in getting to those paths, except for that our committee is a joint committee, chaired by Senator Dan Wolf and Representative Tom Conroy. The Senate's path, led by Chairman Wolf and by Senate President Murray, was to go to $11, which, as you notice, is 50 cents higher than the ballot question, and to index it to inflation. The Speaker of the House wanted to go up to the number that equaled what the ballot petitioners want, but he does not want to index it to inflation. I think the reason is, in fact, I know the reason is that that's the issue, in the indexing to inflation. From the workers' point of view, they're saying as soon as you raise the minimum wage to $10.50, it's going to begin to decline in value every year. We're going to get less, and we're going to come back to you, and you're going to have to raise it again. We raised it in 2007, effective finally in 2009, and so they're saying we'll be back here in 10 years, and you'll be doing it again, and we don't want to have to do that. From businesses' point of view, they've said what we need is predictability. You know, what they say in Massachusetts is we come here because we have an educated workforce, and so what we need is predictability once we get here. They want to have predictable labor costs. And what concerns them would be a situation where every April they're told what their labor costs would increase by, and they would have to comply by January. And that would affect not only minimum wage workers, but it would affect those above them making anything within the increase. And it would certainly affect people making near minimum wage, because you don't want to have people leapfrogged over their supervisors, for example. So it would increase wages each year in that way. Businesses have basically told us they don't necessarily, well, first of all, I haven't heard any business at all, that said that they don't agree that minimum wage in Massachusetts should be increased. It's an expensive state to live in. There are high wages, there is high cost. So that people in that category are zero. Businesses in that category are zero. The High Tech Council, in fact, was probably the most aggressive group in asking us to to raise it the least, and they even said $10, but non-indexed. So the issue here with indexing was that the Speaker's point of view was the $10.50, I think, gets to the number that the petitioners are looking for. Not that he had the petitioners in mind, it's just that if that's going to be considered a fair number, then he got there. He's not willing to go as far as indexing, I think, for the reasons that I explained. So that's the difference, is different leadership. Sally?
So the only difference, the gain, if the ballot question passes, would be indexing and the faster rate of increase. So if say the House bill was the final bill that went to the governor and he signed it, so everything there would remain the same, except for the actual hourly rate and the indexing.
Correct. Indexing is the issue that I think will take the most attention. It's got the most attention from the folks promoting the ballot question, because as you saw, the numbers, whether we go to 1050 or 11, it's not that different. What's different is the indexing. Right? Yeah, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Obviously, the House bill is the better of the three. After talking to you a couple of times, I really thought that the federal minimum wage was $7.25 an hour, and I was surprised when you told me that this is strictly Massachusetts.
Right.
And it's not being done on, it's being on a state-by-state basis. You know, it's like anything else, it's the small business owners that are gonna feel it the most. I had talked to you once before about the teen exemption. You know, I'm in the dry cleaning business. I have 2 locations in Burlington and have for the past 26 years. We hire a lot of the high school girls that are in the 10th and 11th grade, and it's like casual labor. They'll work for like 1 quarter or 2, then they play softball, all lacrosse, you know, and then we hire them back. I believe that responsible type job that they have, which I consider to be casual labor, we pay the $8 an hour. People in our production facility get upwards of $18 an hour. You know, talking to you, it's a shame that there's still adults in parts of the state that are caring for the families that are making $8 an hour. It's a rotten shame, you know, and I agree with you. But this is going to affect the small business. If you open 50 hours a week, you know, and you're going to bump up the minimum wage, you know, to $1 an hour, there's going to be an upward effect. You know, we talked about that. The people that are going to get 8 are going to get 9. The ones that are getting 9, I have to bump them up to 10. Everybody, as secretive as you want to be in business, everybody knows what everybody else is making, okay? So if you're open 50 hours a week and you have 2 employees, or 3 employees, or 5 employees, or 10, most small businesses are open at least 50 hours a week, some more. So you can see by raising, $1 per hour per individual, and having the ripple upward effect, it's gonna be costly, it's gonna be costly. It's a fragile economy. It's too bad these things come along now where there's still glitches in the economy. A lot of small businesses, aren't necessarily doing what they were doing, prior to the housing crash that we had. Hopefully the economy was gonna get better, but there's nothing really to see that. But, it is what it is, and, how you can absorb it, it's gonna be difficult. I do see increases in pricing for a lot of small businesses because, already the utility costs have gone up. We use a lot of utilities. My business is tied to petroleum. Thank God we use natural gas and not oil, but that went up about 30%, But again, it is what it is. I wish the 9 was $8.50, and I wish the 10 was $9.50, and I wish the 10.50 was 10. A little bit more moderate, but it is what it is. So I hope if anything happens, the House bill does pass.
Yeah, just a few things on that. We did consider the arguments that you're raising. At least they're not, whatever consequences fall from the legislation, they're not unintended. They're considered. And in Massachusetts, as you said, we've got to consider the economy of the various communities within the state that sometimes are different. Here in Burlington, our unemployment is among the lowest in the state. But we've had places like New Bedford, Fall River, Worcester, where the unemployment is high. And teen unemployment not only is high, but teens who are employed are making money that's supporting themselves or someone else to a large extent. So we can't, it's very hard for us to figure out how to pay one minimum wage level, or how to provide an exemption for example, kids who live at home who are making mad money. I mean, I don't mean to but I think that's the argument.
Right.
There's not a law that would affect them differently than someone who's making minimum wage, working at a labor job or working retail, and bringing that money home and helping their parents or themselves or a child. And so therefore, it's really very difficult and somewhat unfair to penalize that, the second group of people. There are many people that came to us, kids, teenagers. They came to us to say, this is what I do with my money. I buy my clothes. This is what I do with my money. I put it away for college because I couldn't possibly go to college without working. And if I made less money, it would be harder for me to go to college. And then it affects our economy later because these students contribute to our economy. So on balance, our decision was not to provide. I want to show you something here. It was not to do that. So what I did was I looked at, okay, we have raised the minimum wage before, and arguments are made about what it does to inflation, what it does to unemployment, but we have experience with that. One of the arguments was on the teen unemployment rate. So I looked at, these are states that have the highest minimum wages and no teen exemptions, okay? So this is the unemployment rate among teens in these states. Massachusetts is 20.2. It is high, 20.2, but it's high all around. And these are not considering kids who are in school and not working at all. Then it's very high. But when you look at that, and you can just see for yourself which states they are and what the rate is, the average rate from among these states, right, I've got 3, 6, 9 states, the average is 23.4% unemployment, and the mean, which is the state right in the middle, has a 24.7% unemployment rate. I looked at the states that have the exemption, right? The federal government allows a teen exemption to $4.35 per hour for the first 90 days, okay? Those are the ones that do it. Their average unemployment is 25.1%. So looking at 23.4. So theirs is higher by 1.5. Their medians, that median state in between those 5 is the 26 number. It's an even number, so it's between 2. But it's higher. So there's really no evidence to suggest that just by paying less for teens, it will help the unemployment rate. The other argument that we heard a lot at our hearing was that the argument of raising costs, which is inflation, or fewer jobs. And the argument we get back from economists is that there's a stimulus effect to raising the minimum wage. It's that you pay people that aren't saving money, they're living hand to mouth, and they're spending every dime they get. And therefore, that money is recirculated into the economy, into the local economy. And people who buy things ultimately create jobs. And so while there may be an effect for a few weeks or even a few months into the economy as far as prices or expenses to business, it settles down because money circulates. Now, that's a little oversimplified because there are some businesses where people making minimum wage don't shop. But most of the places paying minimum wage workers are those where minimum wage workers are spending their money. Walmart is the prime example. Walmart is the chain that uses the most minimum wage workers in the nation, and it's the chain where most of their customers are making at or near minimum wage. So they benefit the most when they actually make money when minimum wage is increased. Chris?
One thing I want to mention, it's probably too late for this, but I've been in the education and workforce development field for 30 to 35 years. I hate to put that out there because people do the math. But there was an idea of a lower teen minimum wage. Say the minimum wage was regularly at $9 an hour, and you had a teen wage at $7.50 an hour. But that $1.50 difference would create a pool for education and training. The idea would be that the employer would still pay the $9, but $1.50 of that would be over to the government into the education and workforce development system for the youth. So the youth would get $7.50, but that $1.50 would create a fund for on-the-job training, for apprenticeship, for education, for training. I don't know if those concepts are ever considered. Now, it would be something administratively to put in place. It would take some regulations and some activity, but I think that concept is still a decent concept because there's a lot of research on the lack of education and training that youth get. I mean, they get mentoring and they get supervision from the employer, but it'd be nice to have other resources for education and training for youth. We see it all the time in our career center.
Right.
And just anecdotally, we have job postings that we provide to a youth, and anecdotally we hear that the parent takes that job. The parent applies for that job and gets that job. So I'm reinforcing what you said earlier, that youth are pushed out of the job market. This is the worst youth unemployment we've had in years and years, if you look at the studies like Andy's son studies at Northeastern.
Yeah.
But has anyone mentioned to you or ever heard this concept of an education and training fund tied to a sub-minimum wage?
Well, the education training fund, yes. And my understanding is it's coming out as part of an economic development package that both the governor is introducing to us, but also we're working on independently. So that'll come in, but it won't be funded by, essentially, by youth. Because the proposal of paying youth $1.50 less and putting it into a fund means the youth are paying for it.
Right.
Because the alternative would be give it to them.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I would be in support of that.
I'm not taking a strong stance on it, I'm just putting it out there.
But there was an amendment to do that. In fact, I co-sponsored the amendment to do that in the unemployment bill. It's a question of where the funding comes. And my understanding is it is coming. It'll come later on this session, but it won't be funded through that way.
Thank you.
One thing I was able to do, because Chris works at the One Stop Career Center here in Woburn, so sees a lot of unemployed people, was that there's a provision that also made no sense to me, which is that if you're receiving unemployment benefits, you can extend those benefits if you're involved in a training program that's approved by the Commonwealth and will benefit you in trying to get a job. So you don't have to come to the position where you say, I can't take this training anymore because it's during the day and I have to go out and work. So now you've taken a lower paid job for which either doesn't need training or all. The problem is that you have to apply for that within the first 15 weeks of your unemployment. If you're getting unemployment for 26 weeks under the federal level or 30 under the mass level, why would you be restricted to the first 15 weeks? So we extended that under our bill to 20 weeks unless you can show cause why you should go even beyond the 20 weeks to the period of time you're getting benefits. It just makes sense to me that what we're trying to do is train workers to become reemployed and care for their family in the way that they had been before they were unemployed. Remember, unemployed people, those are people who are generally laid off. These aren't people who quit. You're not entitled to unemployment if you voluntarily quit.
Thank you. Oh,
No, go ahead.
thank you. My name is Erin Calvobacci. I had actually submitted some testimony in regards to supporting a teen wage. I own a manufacturing facility in Swampscott. That's also where our biggest pool is coming from, Lynn, and it is teenagers.
Right.
I had grown my business to 3 retail stores. I'm down to 1 retail stores. Teens are not getting hired because they do not have skills. They do not have skills because they're not getting access to jobs. It's not that older people are getting those jobs. It's because we've put so much pressure on our teens to have all the extracurricular activities and do everything that's supposed to give them a better resume for their college applications in the suburban area.
Right.
That's not the case in Lynn. But here's my issue. I do create a great product. I will say it's a great product. We create chocolate. Our costs will go up. We try to hire people and pay them more than minimum wage. That is going to drastically impact the number of people. We sell into the TJX companies, a Massachusetts company. When we go to them and say, our product costs have gone up because we have to pay more, they can turn and say, we're going to go elsewhere, which is what is happening to our manufacturing facilities in our chocolate industry in this area. So the 23 people that we brought on, we are going to have to look at cutting that workforce. That is what my concern is. We keep hammering our businesses with legislation that really is impeding the growth. And when we talk about small businesses, we really are the small businesses. A small business technically can be 500 employees, correct?
Right.
Okay, we're talking about Main Street. So look around. Burlington is in a really great position in that they have a lot of development. But Reading, Lynn, Wakefield, these are areas that all our Main Street businesses are going away. And that is what my biggest concern is, that not only is it going to be a backlash on teens, it's going to be a backlash on those with special needs. Because typically when you hire someone with special needs, you have to have someone shadow them. So now you're going to be paying 2 people more. It is going to cost people. So I know economists, I've been listening to them talk about how it's going to be better for all. It isn't, because everyone's costs are going to go up and we're still going to be stagnant.
Yeah, I appreciate your testimony, I appreciate your position. The issue goes back to, as I said, we can't, if we make exceptions for one group of people, we're going to create one group of workers in competition with another. And statewide, we're going to then just change the dynamic of which group of workers gets hired over another if it's only because of a bottom line cost figure. Usually it's not. But you know, as an overall perspective, what we found was the economy, to look at the effect on different members of the economy, which includes workers and includes teen workers, that on balance, it's not something that we put into the bill. But I appreciate your point of view. Yep.
Hi, I'm Maureen Rogers with the North Suburban Chamber. Just to sort of parrot a little bit of what you just said, and the gentleman prior to that at the dry cleaning. When the other minimum wages were put into place, it was at smaller increments. Now you're talking about 10% over 2 years, and then another 5%. We haven't even got normal raises with general population that much money. So you're talking about, if you had a minimum wage person, suddenly you're giving them 10% more the first year and 10%, and yet you cannot match that 10%. I'm talking about going from $8 to $9 is a 10% increase.
Right.
And then $9 to $10 is 10% increase.
It's actually a little more than
So-
that. It's more than that. Over the 3 years, you're talking almost 38% increase.
Well, that's
in-
what I'm saying, it's
in
a
cost.
lot, we're talking about how can you can do the minimum wage,
Mhm.
but you're talking about how our expectations are supposed to be to the other employees who haven't got, maybe they've had 2% and 3% and maybe 5% if you're doing fairly well. But that is a lot of money that you're talking about. The other the minimum wages were a quarter, 50 cents and so on. This is hard to swallow for a small business.
The 2 answers I can give you are from one point of view, from the testimony that we took, and from the economic outlook of what will get people to a point where they're currently, people who are currently earning $16,040 a year, which is minimum wage times 40 times the number of weeks in the year, right? They qualify for housing assistance. They qualify for SNAP, nutrition benefits, right? The government is funding a business's labor costs. I don't think that's right. And we haven't had much testimony from people saying that we shouldn't be addressing that. So then you get to the question of, well, what rate? What rate, how fast should we do it? And to that extent, I do want you to keep in mind this chart, which is that to the extent that we want to increase the minimum wage to a lower number, like $9.50 or $10, this isn't the reason to go to $10.50, but I can tell you that this ballot question will pass. It's polling at 70%, and this ballot question is indexed. And so, to the extent that if you ask me to, not that I would do it, but if you say, and it would be too late because we've already voted on it, I already voted for this, but if you were to say, would it be your judgment to push for a $9.50 increase based solely on what the likely outcome would be? I'd say that you're asking for essentially $10.50 and indexed. There would be no incentive for the people at Raise the Wage to Raise Up Massachusetts to take that off. I've talked to them, and one of the topics of conversation that I've raised consistently is, what will it take to satisfy you so that we've raised it to the point where we can talk about you not going forward, right? They're going to go forward, but if they go forward and we end up there, I mean, that's your choice. So for a business, if I'm talking to a business group, as I am with you folks, you've got to keep in mind that, as in many instances, as what I deal with as a legislator, there's really no utopia. There's really no this is good, this is bad. There are choices in context, and this choice in context is really spelled out in this slide, because that's the context. Okay? Oh, sorry.
Just one more question.
Sorry about to you people on TV that I just did that to.
Yeah, this is informative to me. So about the mix of the legislation and the ballot question, Representative Gordon, so
Mhm.
I think you said this earlier, but so if you pass the legislation, the governor signs it, and then the ballot question wins, it doesn't trump everything, like you put that mix together and come up with a new piece of legislation? How does that work?
What would happen is that if the ballot question stays on, and we pass our legislation, and they pass it, and they don't take it off, and they win, then what would happen is that we would put the two together to come up with what we believe would be the most appropriate way to go about it. And I can't tell you what that would be, because that would be up to a negotiation and all, but that's what would happen. So with right to repair, that's what happened.
The
looked
details
at-
of the ballot question don't automatically go into place.
No, something in between would, okay? What would, I'm guessing, because I'm not guessing at, if I was hypothetically looking at the Raise Up Massachusetts analysis, I would be saying that at $10.50, let's say at 11, hypothetically, if I was saying, well, if it's $11 an hour, it's more than $10.50, and I'm gonna ask people to go vote themselves 50 cents less. So I would be concerned if I was on that side of the equation that the ballot question may not be as strong. It wouldn't be polling at 70% if it was less, hypothetically. That's not advocating one position or another. That's just throwing out the strategic thought of, if you're in business, and you're looking at these scenarios. This is really, we're coming down to the crux of what I want to talk to you about. These are the scenarios, number 2, number 3, and number 4. It's not anything less than that, to look at what's happening. Jim?
So with the ballot question, what would have to happen for the group to pull the ballot question?
Really, they would have to choose not to get the other 20,000 signatures. They would have to choose it's not in their interest to do that.
And do you think either the House or Senate bill is sufficient for them, given that they already have a perception that the ballot question will be voted affirmatively in November?
Right.
To sort of stop their process?
Passes through conference committee and goes to the governor, and the governor signs it. They've said that they will continue to bring people, to try to bring people to the polls to fight for indexing and the tip minimum. That's what they've said. Now, they could change their position, of course, but That's what they've said. I have no reason to believe that that's not the case. So the House version, I don't think, from what we've heard, the House version may not be enough to convince the folks at Raise Up Mass to pull. The Senate version may. So if the Senate version goes through, right, then they may say, you know what, $11, I mean, just logically, am I going to ask someone to vote themselves a decrease of 50 cents, even though indexing is involved? I'm going to have to explain indexing, right? Again, I'm not talking for them, this is just my own strategic thought. I think if the Senate version was to go through, I would expect they would say it's going to be difficult for us to pass this ballot question. I would think. Again, it's just me thinking. I think that the conference committee is going to be tasked to come up with something in between. And I think that the safest bet for both sides would be to have something that does not require a ballot question, because there's always a chance that ballot questions win or lose. And so I would like to see the legislature solve this problem in a way that satisfies each side equally. And in satisfying each side equally, it means each side is compromised. Each sides have to give a little to get, how close does it have to be, so that this is settled by the legislature. I also personally want to settle it because it means a lot to me. I've spent my most recent career as an employment lawyer, and I'd like to solve the problem. So I think that's the answer. I don't think the House version necessarily, the House version is on one side, the Senate version on the other. I think that conference committee comes between them, and then is put to Raise Up Mass. Is that close enough? And I can't answer that question. I don't know what it would be. Anybody else? Yep, Sally?
Why did the House bill not include indexing?
Well, House leadership, I think I answered that question before, but I think House leadership looked at the ramifications of indexing, and they decided from their point of view that it would create too much unpredictability for small business and for business in general. And predictability is very important to small business. I think that they considered that indexing will in fact impact workers because it will take away the value of the minimum wage over time, which again can be addressed later. I know, they know, I should say. But they decided that predictability at this point was too important, and so they did not include it. The Senate did. The Senate probably looked at, again, I can't speak for the Senate, but they probably looked at it and came up with the other answer, which was that the minimum wage isn't worth what it's worth almost the day after you vote for it because of inflation. There's a fair reason to come to both to these conclusions. Okay? Everybody, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And if you have any further questions, I'm always available. You can look up the website, send it to me, look up my number. I'm on the internet. Thanks.